So today we're going to look at Nehemiah. You know, it's funny when all these different things happen. When I have to ask, and when I'm asked to speak on things, because I haven't been to Bible school and all this, I think, I'll speak about some of the women of the Bible, or I speak about something simple that I can understand. And then when we looked at these, we thought, we'll do heroes of the Bible, do prophets. I thought, a man of God. How can I speak about that? I don't know enough. And then Ian said, I've got a series on Nehemiah. It went on for about 5 months. I'm like, I definitely shouldn't be speaking about Nehemiah, because Ian went into every single syllable in the man's life, you know. But anyways, so I just thought, let me find out about Nehemiah and bring it out in a simple way. So this week and next week, we're going to look at 2 simple things about Nehemiah's life. And it really, really has inspired me, this man. It really is quite incredible. So to put it in context, Nehemiah, this story happened about 400 to 500 years before Jesus came. And there's Nehemiah, there's Ezra, there is Esther is around this time, Malachi. All of these people happened. And then God was silent for about 400 years, and then Jesus was born. So this is the time we're looking at, these 400 to 500 years before Jesus was born. I just wanted to read something. Life is a journey, and every journey has a destination, right? Everybody ends up somewhere in life, and a few people end up somewhere on purpose. And we are those people. We are going to end up somewhere on purpose. And I think when we're Christ followers, we don't just bump along on a journey and hope to find out where we're going. We are purposeful. We are following Jesus, and we do it on purpose. And so that kind of sums up Nehemiah's life. So Nehemiah was this man. He had lived in, so you know when all the Jews were in Israel, and then, Nebuchadnezzar comes and he takes them all, and they all go into exile. Remember, Jeremiah said there's going to be an exile, they're all going to be taken away. And so we know the story of Daniel, they're all in Babylon, they're all in exile. So that's where everyone is. Nehemiah is a second generation kid, okay? He grew up in Babylon. He knows nothing about Israel. He knows nothing about the Jews. He's never even been to Jerusalem. He's never been there. And he is living in exile. Kind of like people growing up here, and you say, where are you from? I'm from Aberdeen. And you think, well, your family or your relatives must have come from somewhere else. And so he's grown up in a foreign land, okay? It reminds me of Ian's family. In the 30s, there was a huge difficulty in up and down the country, and there was a lot of job losses and all sorts of problems. And in the 30s, some of his relatives decided to go to Detroit in America because there was jobs there, and so they went there and they settled there. And these were God-fearing people who then moved there, and they settled there, and they became very wealthy. They did very well for themselves. And I remember when we were on honeymoon in the 80s, we went to the States, and we actually visited some of them. And they were very wealthy. They were really good, but they had lost their faith. And they had gone to a new place. They hadn't made it a priority to find church, to find a God community. And so they got lost. And then they were like, we found a church we're going to take you to on Sunday, because they knew that we obviously went to church, and they found a church and they took us to church, but it was alien to them. So the difference, but why I'm telling you those 2 stories is Nehemiah has grown up like a foreigner in another country. He's grown up there, but his parents have raised him well. He may as well have grown up in Israel. He knows all about the God of heaven. He knows all about the laws of Moses. He knows all the stories, and he has a heart and a passion for Jesus. And that's the difference between him and people who go away and then they don't find a church community and they walk away from the Lord. So in the story, when it opens up, 50,000, about 50,000 Jews have started to go back, have gone back. Zerubbabel, a godly man, led 50,000 of them back to Jerusalem to go and start building the temple. So they had been there for 70 years, and just like it said, Jeremiah said, after 70 years, God's going to make a way for you back. to go back. So 50,000 of them had gone back. And so the story of Nehemiah opens when Nehemiah is there, and he's got a job. He's not a priest. He's not working for God. He's just what we are. He's a layman. He's doing his own thing. And his job is being a cupbearer for the king. This job was a really good job. This job required, there was a few requirements. You had to be physically fit. You had to be a very brave person and courageous. You had to always be able to put on a smile and mask your feelings because the king didn't want to be sad. And you had to be good looking. Isn't that amazing? So all of these qualities were important for being a cupbearer to the king. And we find him there. So he is in the very seat of power. And remember Queen Esther, how beautiful she was and how God brought her because of what he gave her. That was her talent that he brought and used for her. And the same with Nehemiah. So he's in this place. And it opens up, and I'm just going to read, open up the first few verses here. It says, in the late autumn, in the 7th month, in the 20th year of the king, I was in the fortress of Susa. Hanai, one of my brothers, came to visit me with some of the men who had just arrived. They've been to Judah, and some of them have come back. And this man called Hanai came back. I said to him, tell me, what is it like, those 50,000 that have gone back? What is it like about the Jews who have returned? How are they getting on? What's going on? What's happening? They said to me, things are not going that well. For those who have returned to the province of Judah, they are in great trouble and disgrace. The walls of Jerusalem have been torn down, and the gates have been destroyed by fire, and they're still in that dilapidated place. Then Nehemiah says, when I heard this, I sat down and I wept. In fact, for days I mourned and fasted and prayed to the God of heaven. So we find this man, and this man is a godly man, and he finds himself in a situation. He's got this great job. Professionally, he is doing well. Financially, he is made. He is secure in everything, but he has this interest, and he asks what's going on. And when he finds out what's going on, he had two choices. He could have said, oh, what a shame. But what has broken his heart? He allows the pain of the exiles that have gone back to break his heart. So there's 3 things I'm going to talk about today, okay? The first thing is that he's going to wear 3 different hats, okay? So the first hat he is putting on is the cupbearer's hat. So as a cupbearer, he is doing well. He is serving the king, everything is going great, and he is doing wonderful. He is loving his job, he is surviving, he is thriving, he is doing well. But even in this position, whatever position you find yourself in, allow God to break your heart for what breaks his heart, and allow him to break your heart. What breaks your heart? What injustice is in your world that you think you could make a difference in? We all can make a difference. I wrote down 5 different people here wearing their cupbearer's hat. I was thinking of Christine Kane. She's a speaker. She happens to arrive in an airport. She's in the airport waiting to board the next plane. She sees a poster about human trafficking and allows God to break her heart. And that started the whole thing. Because when God breaks your heart for something, a vision is born. And a vision results in concern. You will hear something that gives you attention. Something will bother you. Something will concern you. You will find yourself thinking about nothing else. You will waken up and it'll be the first thing you think about. You'll spend your free time Googling it and finding out things. You may lose sleep over it. You won't be able to let it go because it is not letting you go. And a good leader will always show concern for others, no matter how busy the world is. And so because of that, she allowed herself to get involved, and she has now headed up this incredible campaign. Mother Teresa, she just went as a nun to India, And when she saw the poorest of the poor, it said when she arrived, she never went back to Albania. That's where she's from. She never saw her mum or her sister or her family again. She gave her life away for the poorest of the poor because something stirred her heart, and she couldn't just sit in her convent. She had to do something. Thinking about the Trussell Trust, thinking about, I just found this out last night and I was fascinated by it, the food bank. So it started with a couple. Their names are, what's their names again? Carol and Paddy Henderson. Never heard of them in my life. But their mum had left them a legacy, some money. And they didn't know what to do. This is that woman, his mum was called Betty Trussell. And so they were in Bulgaria and they heard about the children living rough in Bulgaria, and they started looking after the children in Bulgaria with this money. And that was in 1997. Scroll on 3 years, somebody comes to him from Salisbury and says, do you know that there's people in this country that are hungry? And they had no idea. They started the charity in their garden shed where they made up packages of emergency food and started giving them to people, food to keep them going for 3 days. It started in a shed because something broke their hearts. And now the food banks are up and down this country. They're spoken about in the media. They're spoken about everywhere. I couldn't believe it when I started reading. Something stirred me to find out about that. We all have garden sheds. We all have something to give. I was speaking to somebody just this morning and they said, God has blessed me so much that I have this desire. It would be criminal for me to hold on what I have if I didn't use it for the glory of God. So we're all called to give and do something. Okay, and thank you for the sausage rolls. That's your ministry. Okay, thinking about even champions, it was what broke Craig Johnson's heart when he saw the kids that had nothing, and that was birthed. So what is God birthing in all of you? We are all leaders. We're all called to do something. And that's what Nehemiah did. He could have said, oh, what a shame. The walls are broken down. Never mind. Let me go and serve the king. He allowed it to fester within his heart and to burn within him. Okay? So the first thing is, then he goes on and he said, O Lord God of heaven, the great and awesome God who keeps his covenant in unfailing love, listen to my prayers. I confess I have sinned. I confess the people have sinned. But, oh God, if you would hear my prayer and if you would grant me success today when I speak to the king, I will wait. And you know what? I think what is lovely is he didn't just immediately run in. The first thing he did was fall on his knees and pray. And he committed that desire, that thing that was stirring in him. He decided to wait and to wait and to process it and to wait and to pray about it and wait and fast and wait and think and wait. We're all in a waiting season. What God has dropped inside of all of you sometimes needs a season of waiting, because it says in the Bible, those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. You don't want to go and take something out too soon because actually it'll get damaged. If you've ever tried to help a butterfly come out of their cocoon, you actually will kill the butterfly. In the struggle of getting out, they need to struggle and struggle to get the air into their wings to allow it to flourish. So don't do things too soon. I am very excited. When I see something, I just want to run in and fix a day, put on my Superwoman t-shirt and sort it all. But sometimes that's the wrong thing to do. In fact, most times it's the wrong thing to do. And we find him 4 to 6 months later. He has been praying, he's been weeping, and he's been waiting on God. So his first hat he wore was the cupbearer's hat. I just wanted to take it personal just now. In 2008, and I've shared this before, we were on holiday in Florida and we were driving to church, and of course there was this long, ridiculous queue to get to church, and I was so frustrated. I was like, Ian, we're going to be late. We should have left earlier. All those lovely Sunday arguments you have in the car going to church, right? And then when you get to the traffic lights, there's a policeman there. I'm in the queue to get to church, and something broke within me. God, people are queuing to get to church. And I remember crying, and I was embarrassed. The kids like over here, and I something landed in my spirit. I cried. I was like, God, what about Scotland? Have you forgotten us? Have you walked past us? We've got piddly churches. We're begging people to come. And here they're queuing up. The whole police section is out here looking at manning the traffic to get to church. Something birthed within me. I didn't come back and say, right, we need a bigger building. We came back and we waited and we prayed and we waited. And I'll come back to that story in a minute, what the wait looks like, okay? But God birthed something. I didn't know what would happen 12 years later, but something stirred. It needed God to not just birth something within me. I needed to get a larger mind. I needed to get a bigger vision. I needed to increase my faith, okay? So that's what can happen And, looking back on this journey, it has been amazing, and I'll come back to that in a moment. So the second thing that he's got the cupbearer's hat. He now takes his cupbearer's hat off and he puts on his architect hat. What is he going to do to plan? He's got his architect hat. An architect is a designer. How could this be? Now, this is where I go wrong. I would be lying in bed and think, okay, Lord, I don't know if you've got a plan, but here's an idea. This is my... I would start giving the Lord ideas as if he needs my ideas. But he is wearing the architect's hat. He's planning, he's thinking, and he's committing everything to prayer, and he's thinking about it. And Lord, when it's the right time, you make a way. You open the door. When it's the right time, Lord, you open the door for me. And so, without vision, people perish. People needed to be led by someone who had a good vision, who could see something. It needed 4 to 6 months of him praying over it and stirring it. You see, he has lived in this foreign country. He has never even visited his homeland. It's just a mystery. He doesn't even know what it's like. But it's a God thing when God births something within you to do. So he's got this hat on now. I was thinking, about butterflies, and that this caterpillar, a caterpillar will only ever remain as a caterpillar all its life unless it's compelled, it's something within it, psyche, compels it to eat and compels it to make a cocoon and develop into a butterfly. Only when the caterpillar submits to the cocoon will he become a butterfly. And sometimes it's in that season of submitting, not my will, but your will. Not what I want to do, but what you want to do. I don't know what plans you have, God. I do know that my parents told me about Jeremiah, and we would all go back. I know that you have plans for that land. But God, I need to submit my ideas and my thoughts to you. And in the waiting process, I'm going to see what's going to happen. George Verwer passed away 2 weeks ago. And George Verwer was a 19-year-old man. I was listening to him, a 19-year-old teenager. Think of a 19-year-old in your world. And he was at a Billy Graham event, and he decided to put his hand up and find Jesus. He died 2 weeks ago at the age of 84. He submitted, he said, he just decided, that's it, I am 110% in. And it said that he personally gave away more than 1 million copies of the Bible throughout his life. In fact, when we had the Ukrainians event, Ian contacted OM. Ian had been speaking to George, and George said, we've got the material. Tell me how many you need. He sent the Bibles here personally to give away. He gave that away. There's now 6 or 7 mercy ships around the world because something birthed within him. And he thought, how can we go and access, and all the complications of being missionaries? Well, we'll have a hospital boat. I mean, who would have thought of that? But something landed in a 19-year-old, and in his submission, God used him magnificently. And that's what God can do with any of us. And you put on your hat of waiting, So Jeremiah, he goes and he thinks, right, I've got this on, and he starts making plans. And in this thing here, he's waiting. Now, I did say the characteristics of being a cupbearer is you always have to be smiley. The king comes in and you say, hello. Your mother could have died. Anything could have happened, but you don't want to upset the king. That was one of their characteristics. So this day, he comes in and his face cannot disguise what's in his heart anymore. He doesn't mean to talk to the king. He didn't say, King, I have something to say to you. but God stirred the king. And I think that's really important. When we wait, it is the most amazing thing. Early the following spring, so this is now 4 to 6 months later, as I was serving the king with his wine, I had never, ever appeared sad before him. I had never been sad in his presence. And the king said to me, "Why are you looking so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled." Then I was terrified, but I replied, "Long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is lying in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire." The king said, "How can I help you?" And I love this next bit. With a quick prayer to heaven, with a quick prayer to the God of heaven. He didn't just speak from his heart. We send those quick prayers up. "Oh God, help me. Give me the right words. Help me, Lord." He must have sent up one of those quick prayers. I replied, "If it please the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried." The king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked, "How long will you be gone? When will you return?" And after I told him how long I would be gone, the king agreed to my request. If the next day when he had heard initially 6 months ago, and he said, "Guys, I have to go, king, I have to go," it was the wrong timing. You see how God stirred not just his heart, not just grew his vision, not just grew his capacity, but he was working on the king's heart. And God stirred the king to ask the question. And that would never normally happen, but that's how God works. We have to wait. Waiting is a season, but in that waiting, God has brought as if all the ducks we speak about all the ducks being lined in a row. Everything is perfect, and he asks the king. We're going to look at what happens next week. But I just wanted to speak about that. This is a man who is secure professionally, financially, and everything is secure within his life. Positionally, he is one of the highest positions. He's got the ear of the king. He is in the center of government. Nehemiah is in a place where everything is going perfect. He is secure personally. All the money, he's not going to be made redundant anytime soon unless he accidentally drinks poison that was meant for the king. He is going to be okay. And yet he allowed all that security. He submitted that security to the Lord and said, "Lord, if you would use me." But maybe he might have said, "I don't want you to use me, but I am willing to be used." And it's in that willingness to be used that God sees the heart, because God looks in the inside, not in the outside. Why Ian and I love this book particular is that happened in 2008 when we were on holiday, and I had this amazing thing, and I would dream about it and imagine what it'd be like to people queuing up coming to church. I thought of all this. And in the winter of 2009, everything seemed to be going great. We were lining up all of our ducks. Everything was going great. The church was full. Inside 3 months, this is what took place. The kids' pastor decided that they were going to resign and they were going to get married and move to America. The church manager that we had at the time, he decided to also resign and get married and go to America. And we had journeyed with him for many years. And his wife led the whole students' ministry, and they were now going to just walk away from it all. The person who was co-leading with me the mums and toddler group, she decided she was going to relocate down to Callendar and leave that ministry. My dad was diagnosed with cancer. The Zikafus, the American missionaries that had come to work with us, he developed cancer and he died, so all of that disappeared as well. The people who were heading up the Alpha course and had done Alpha for a long time, they decided that the church wasn't the right place for them, and they decided to leave as well. The treasurer, who had been with my dad since 1993 and had been such a wonderful woman, she decided to relocate down to St. Andrews and move house. And they left as well. There was a couple of missionaries called the Sutherlands. Tim and Marquita, they felt God was calling them to Aberdeen, and we were like, well, all these people are leaving, but Tim and Marquita are coming. That's going to be amazing. And that night, on the 30th of December, we got a phone call to say, sorry, our plans have changed. We're moving to Wales now. And that's not happening. And there was a lovely young man called Elijah who was in the church, and he was heading up our prayer ministry, and we'd tried so hard to get him a different visa to stay here. He decided God was calling him back to Nigeria. What happened to the plans? What happened to those things that were birthed inside me? Everybody was leaving. And on the night of the 31st, my neighbor who was 3 doors down, she has a very disabled son, and she said, there's a man from Sri Lanka here. I told him you're Christian. He would like to speak with you. So we went to visit him, and we were praying over her son and all this kind of stuff. And this man said, I have a word from God for you. And he spoke about Nehemiah. And it didn't feel right. We were like, what? And he spoke a whole bunch of things to Ian about Ezra and Nehemiah. And we were like, okay, right. Okay, that's fine. We'll park that and see what happens. But you know, over the next few years, we kept coming back to that word that God had given us. We kept coming back to the dreams that he had placed within both of us. And all of those things started coming together. But it was a waiting period. And when God waits, he brings in the right people at the right time. And God can do the most incredible thing. This building was never in our plan. Never. Maybe filling the church at that time and multiple services was going to be the ultimate of what we were going to do. But when everybody started leaving one at a time, and we were left with a skeleton group of people, and my dad was very ill and was about to pass away, we were like, God, what's going on? But he had a plan. And so even though the walls were broken down, even though things were not going right, those 50,000 people that had gone back, they had managed to build the temple, but they had then got distracted. We're going to find out more about them next week. They were building their own houses. Everything was happening. And they were like, well, God's brought us back here. We'll die here, but nothing else is happening. They were discouraged, but they didn't know that God was stirring the heart of a man to come and lead them. God always brings the right people at the right time. And God stirred him to come back and to do something new. And so the third point is he put on the hat of a builder, a hard hat. And that's what he did. He put on a hard hat and he thought, you know what? I'm going to go back. I'm going to go back. And, you know, we're going to find out what happened, because he didn't just go back. The king said to him, right, you're going to need some letters because you're going a long journey back and you might get attacked. Let me give you some provisions. Let me give you some horses to protect you. Let me give you some letters that I have sent you back. And the Lord provided all of these things for him. You know, if he had jumped on his camel on the 6 months earlier and ridden all the way back and said, guys, I'm here, what are we going to do? Nothing would have happened. But he was going back not with the provision of a godly king. You see how God can use ungodly people to do things for him? God stirred the hearts of the people in Aberdeen city to give us this building. Ian has had people very high up in the city have said, we are so thrilled that you have that building. How would that have ever happened? We were an insignificant, tiny church, but God has grown us. God has done things, and God has done things. He's increased our capacity, and that's why Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, is so amazing. You know, and we now look, you know, I'm just going to round this up here because I'm going to finish it off next week. But, you know, we look at where we are now. When I read out all of what happened in the waiting, but we look at this. We have a building. And when we didn't just get this building, they threw in a 6-story building because they didn't know what to do with it, okay? So the city threw in a 6-story building as well, which is incredible to help us. The road was called Conference Way. They allowed us, we had the boldness to say, oh, you don't want it to be called Conference Way. Can we change the name? We got to call it Kingsway. I mean, who would do that? That's impossible. We got to rename the road that the building is on. they left all the furniture, they left the staging, they left the lighting, they left the chairs because it was the perfect timing and we needed that to happen. You know, God's timing is perfect. You know, God stirred people, and there's people here that God stirred you from different parts of the country. Oh, why don't you relocate to Aberdeen? Many, many people relocated. And I've said this before, that I had this picture. I don't get pictures, but I had this picture dream. I don't know what it is, but I felt I was sitting looking at the computer. And, you know, I remember being at work one day and they said, you know, we're to go to a room, switch on our computers, and they were fixing something remotely. And I watched the mouse moving and I was like, wow, they're fixing this remotely. Isn't this crazy? And suddenly the Lord said to me when we got this building, I am fixing this remotely. And we have watched God moving people in from different parts of the country. We've watched God blessing us, giving us gifts, giving us blessings and provision. And we have to steward it wisely. We are so humbled with what God has done. The one thing that Nehemiah did constantly was he gave God all the glory. And if you know nothing else, you will know that Ian and I will stand and we will give God glory for everything that happens. This is nothing to do with us. It's nothing to do with the position we're in or what we said or what we did. This is all God's doing and God's glory. You know, it happened to be that Ian was preaching in What's in Your Hand. And with that, it was Barry McAllister, was able to go and say, well, this is what we have in our hand. I know it's $1 million short from what you're wanting, but this is what we have. You know, what a bold move. Oh, that's fine, we'll accept that. We're able to move in rent-free. I mean, the bookshop needed a home. It didn't need a home 3 years ago. It needed a home, and we were able to provide the Equip bookshop with a home. This town needed a large coffee shop so that many people could come with their wheelchairs and their buggies and that. We don't know what else God has planned, but all we know is when you wait, when you allow God to stir your heart, to say, God, send me to the city. We want to be a city on a hill. We want to be a city on a hill. We had no idea he was going to give us a tower that we can pray over, the city on a hill. God has done it. And we're going to see next week how God has done it, how God did it for Nehemiah. He's wearing his hard hat now, and we're going to see what God does next week. Okay, there are some questions here, and these questions will come up, and then you can just discuss them around your table. Okay, thank you.